evening and welcome to Frames. I'm Jim Eltoff. Tonight, 3 films for you from the recent St. Louis Filmmakers Showcase. We'll see a story of loss, a story of love, and a documentary that I guarantee will have you scratching your head and wondering how local government could have gotten so crazy. With me, documentary filmmaker Dan Warner, who directed and co-produced our first film tonight. Dan, welcome to Frames. Thank you for being here. How did you come to this story?
It was actually a story in the Post-Dispatch. I was looking for subjects for a documentary, and it immediately jumped out to me that this was a unique
Must have been just a little item. I mean, this is not, you know.
It was a pretty in-depth story, not nearly as in-depth as we ended up getting in the documentary, but yeah, it was pretty lengthy. And
it made you feel like there's a great story here.
You know, initially I thought it was kind of a quirky short story, a 5-minute piece about this strange situation and these colorful characters. And it wasn't until we actually did the first interview with Dave Rowland, the lawyer that you'll see in the film, who really kind of opened my mind to what this was really about.
And about Janice Duffner, the woman who's the principal in all of this. Mm-hmm. You met her and she was willing to share her story?
Jan was great. She was great throughout the filmmaking. She was great talking to. Spent many hours on the film with Jan. She's very open about it and willing to talk about it. And you know, she's very, understandably, very angry and upset about her situation.
It's very spunky. This is not someone who's going to roll over. You can just tell.
Absolutely
this
not.
woman's going to stand her ground.
No, she's a fighter.
Anything you want to say to set it up before we watch?
No. Just
okay.
The film.
Then the story of Janice Duffner, the town of St. Peters, and turf wars.
My husband was in the military. He wouldn't move back to St. Charles because of the traffic. So we went to North County. I prefer St. Charles. Right now I don't prefer St. Peters, but I prefer St. Charles. In '02, I became a grandmother. Then I started trying to find a house and decided that I couldn't find an existing house, so I had one built.
So when you moved into the neighborhood, you said that you were kind of the first house.
I was the first house. The next 3 years, it filled up. You see all the sedum that's up there on that hillside? I started. That was my first project, was to put all the sedum in. It's a third of an acre. It's one of the larger yards in the neighborhood. These roses, they haven't been hit as much with the Japanese beetles. It's taken me 3 days to deadhead all of these roses. The monarch butterflies, they lay their eggs only in the milkweed. And milkweed is dwindling, and so is the monarch butterflies population. Didn't have a problem until 3 years ago. I get a letter from the city of St. Peters. In viewing your property from the street, we don't think you have 50% turf grass. And I says, what's turf grass? This little old group of little old men in our neighborhood that don't know what else to do with their time decided they didn't like my garden. They told me that I needed grass to make my flowers look good. I says, where's the variance? Paperwork. Went to the variance hearing. The little old group of little old men and their wives came in. Oh, the Duffners have ponds and flowers and insects. I went into that hearing thinking that I was going to be grandfathered, so not to worry.
I had actually just had to turn around from a proposed vacation. We were going to go down to Tennessee, and I had gotten a call from a court saying that I was going to have to go argue a case the next week. And so vacation was out the window. And as we were stopped at a restaurant, I got a call from Carl Duffner. We've got a flower garden on our property, and they're telling us we've got to tear part of it out and plant it with grass. But my wife is allergic to grass.
Years ago, when I would mow, I couldn't sleep of a night, and I would become asthmatic. And I used an inhaler. About a month ago, the neighbor behind was out mowing, and I think I ingested some of the particles from the grass, and I thought I was having a heart attack for 3 days. I was vomiting. I was having severe pain. I had to make a doctor's appointment and go in and have a stress test. It's all around me. I have to live with it, but I don't have to grow it.
I immediately knew this was going to be the kind of case that we wanted to be involved with. My wife Jennifer and I founded the Freedom Center in 2010 because we wanted there to be a state-focused organization in Missouri that was aimed exclusively at advancing individual liberty and transparent, constitutionally limited government. All landscaping shall be properly maintained according to city ordinances presently in effect. A minimum of 50% of all yard areas shall be comprised of turf grass. Trees shall not be planted within 6 feet of a property line in the side and rear yard. The individual property owner shall be responsible for such maintenance. The city wants to call this a zoning law, but it's not a zoning law. A zoning law puts restrictions on how a property may be used. It does not compel an owner to use their property in a way they don't want to. I'm not aware of any other case quite like it, and that means it's an opportunity to go out and make a really interesting and we hope positive point of law. One of the other elements that we've brought into it is an Eighth Amendment challenge, talking about cruel and unusual punishments. The penalties for failing to comply with the turfgrass mandate are pretty severe. Now, for a first-time offense, the minimum penalty is a $10 fine, and it can go up to $250 fine. But it's not just that fine. Each day that you're out of compliance is a separate offense. The law also provides for a penalty of imprisonment for up to 10 days. Not just one up to 10-day penalty for imprisonment, but for each day that you're out of compliance. The Duffners have been out of compliance with the turfgrass mandate since about December 1st, 2014. We're now well more than 2 years after the fact. So right now, the maximum penalties that they could be subjected to, more than $200,000 in criminal civil penalties and more than 23 years in prison.
I slipped a piece of paper in your pocket. Please hold on to it.
Let's delve a little bit into the history of it. So, zoning laws emerged around the turn of the 20th century. Usually, wealthy people in a city wanted to preserve their environs in a certain way. Hey, why don't you pass a law that says along this road, property can only be used in this way? And eventually, courts became more comfortable with the idea of saying, well, in an urban setting, we really have to make sure that people aren't disturbing the comfort and peace of their neighbors. We're going to allow the government to ban certain businesses in certain areas. Well, now we're going to allow them to restrict certain businesses to certain areas. There was more pressure to make sure that factories were being located a reasonable distance away from residences and that sort of thing. All right, we think zoning laws are okay. The first time these types of laws were passed, in Kansas City. The Missouri Supreme Court said you can restrict the use of property, but you've got to compensate the owners for that loss of use. There was another almost identical case out of St. Louis. Hey, remember what we said a couple decades ago? Forget that. No, if the city wants to restrict your property use, they don't have to pay for it at all. And that's when kind of the explosion of zoning laws started to happen in Missouri. So it initially started as an urban issue. Around the 50s, that's where I think the suburbs come into it. In the last, I'd say, 20 to 25 years, you've seen suburbs flexing their muscles a little bit more to impose uniformity. And initially it began with regulating at least arguably harmful uses of your property, but it's grown. It's an aesthetic thing. They want a kind of a uniform presentation when it comes to their yard. It's kind of like a Stepford Wives thing, you know? Everyone must be uniform. It's not that homogeneity itself is the problem, it's the exclusion of people who choose to do something different. Effectively, they're trying to become supercharged homeowners associations. So homeowners associations are private entities. If people make that choice to live in such a community, they are binding themselves to those rules. It's different when the government's doing it because there's nothing voluntary about it. It's just a sheer exercise of force. That's a very concerning trend. If someone else's idea of what's beautiful can allow them to overcome your individual constitutionally protected freedoms, where does that stop? One of the prices we pay for a free society is that sometimes people will use their freedom in ways that we wouldn't choose to. When communities start putting up walls, regulatory walls, it's a very sneaky way of keeping out people that you don't want. And one of the things that we've seen in American society is it's a really bad thing. Awful things can happen when members of a community can decide, we're not really comfortable with this type of person here. Things like the turfgrass mandate, it's an attempt to try and block out people of a certain economic class. It takes a lot of physical effort or money to maintain a lawn. With Carl, you know, he had quadruple bypass heart surgery a few years ago. He's got no business trying to mow a lawn. And then you've got Jan battling breast cancer, and she's allergic to grass. The only way they can comply with this mandate, really, is if they pay someone else to do it. It effectively places this economic barrier and says only people who are either young and vigorous enough to do this work themselves and have the leisure time, or people who are wealthy enough to be able to pay someone else to do that work for them are allowed to live in this community.
The letter from the city said that they had a concern, okay? So somebody had put in an anonymous concern. Well, I knew where the concern was coming from.
I personally think that one of the problems with society today is that we very frequently don't know our neighbors much at all. I think that impacts our relationships with each other and the way that we think about each other. You might be able to address a particular problem just by going and knocking on the door of your neighbor and saying, hey, I had a question about this. It has become extraordinarily easy to get the government to do that for you.
A group of neighbors were upset with the next door neighbor running a tax service out of her house. I got nominated to call the city of St. Peter's and asked if she had a business license, of which she did not. And I asked, well, she's been running this business for the last 12 years. What is her penalty? Oh, none. She just has to get a business license. Well, the very next ordinance after the business is 50% turf grass. Okay? So they found it that way. Very next week, I get a letter from the city of St. Peter's.
Inadvertently, we've kind of coarsened relationships by allowing for this governmental intervention into what really should be person-to-person conversations.
Well, there's lots up the street that have nothing but dandelions, okay? They don't have 50% turf grass. The neighbor complains about it. He says, I don't have a problem about your roses. He says, they're gorgeous. He says, I have a problem with all these dandelions that's next door to me. And I says, well, I can tell you that St. Peter's has an ordinance. Turn them in. But he says, oh, no, I won't do that. I mean, I have been in tears with the neighbors. Hey, I have a problem, and it doesn't matter. I don't speak to a few of them. The group that tried to, put in digs to me, which I ignored, they are vicious. It's not their concern if it harms me. It's they want it just because they want it. I have told people that if you don't like my garden, to close your eyes, don't come by my house. I mean, I had a pair of garden shears that disappeared, and I think I was being stalked. I laid down my garden shears, and then I go back to where my roses were, and my garden shears weren't there anymore. So I think I was being stalked.
September 2014. Something?
We filed the state case in September 2014. Okay. I took them on as a client about July.
Okay. So then that was dismissed, a few months later by...
Why don't I walk you through it?
Yes.
Okay, filed the lawsuit in September of 2014. The city filed a motion to dismiss. Normally you accompany your motion with, here's the explanation why. And I kept waiting for it. We didn't know what we were fighting against. The day before the hearing, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe even later, they file their memorandum. So we go in there for the hearing that morning. Their attorney jumped in. Oh, well, it's got to be thrown out for this, that, and the other. And it was just, I knew right then, I was trying to swim upstream. The judge says, we are going to throw out the case. The Duffners waived all of their constitutional arguments and they missed a statutory deadline, so we took it up to the Court of Appeals. They said, no, they did not waive their constitutional arguments. You can go back and amend your petition. Now we're in 2016, back to circuit court. The judge says, you should have asked to amend it back after I first dismissed it. We did not want to be in front of that judge anymore. This is getting into the weeds, but after zoning laws started to be implemented, they would challenge this all the time. Tons of these cases. Courts ended up adopting a rule. You can only prevail if you show that it was totally irrational. The hope is that courts will recognize if cities dictate what they must do with their property, even if it makes them sick. If nothing else, that's a bridge too far. Hopefully we'll start them thinking, maybe we should have drawn this line previously. The nature of government is to continue pushing the envelope. And that's why it's so important that we find a case that will draw that line. But I mean, the hope of crossing that finish line is why we do what we do. You know, the hope that one day, we'll get that ruling, we'll get, that legislative decision that fixes something that was wrong, something that was bad for people. That's why we go through what we do, to try and make it happen. So,
from sunup to sundown. There's very few times that I'm not out here. It is my passion. And she says, well, you can pay somebody to do your yard. And I says, I have set out on that ground for the last 13 years. Me and my butcher knife has cleared off that property. I said, me and my butcher knife will be out there again. And I said, you're telling me that I've got to give up my gardening just so you can see grass here. Government by the people, for the people? No. I don't think that it should be an ongoing thing the rest of my life, but I have made my grandchildren promise that if Grandma dies and this is still going on, that you protect my garden. If you want any kind of inheritance from your grandmother. I just want the ordinance to go away. I want my life to be normal. Yeah.
The prohibition against cruel and unusual punishments and excessive fines is not just about the penalties actually imposed, but also the threat. Because the threat is how you manipulate behavior. So if the government is able to level an extraordinary threat against its citizens, then it can effectively force them to do whatever the government wants them to do. Simply by having that tool available to it, there is a very real risk that eventually the tool is going to be used. It would be speculating, but I've had a lot of experience observing how governments deal with these things. People who have power and authority don't like to see that power or authority questioned. The other element to this, the people responsible for making these decisions aren't the ones paying for it. I do not know for a fact because the city of St. Peter's will not turn over the records to show me. I suspect that they have spent tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money pursuing this issue. I think two words can account for it: pride and unaccountability. The city could fix this with the stroke of a pen. The turfgrass mandate has no real purpose, no legitimate purpose. 99% of the people who live in St. Peter's are going to have grass lawns anyway. All they have to do to make this entire issue go away is just strip one sentence out of their law. And it would have almost zero practical effect anywhere in the city. But they're willing to spend tens of thousands, and who knows, by the time it's all said and done, possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars, fighting to make sure an elderly couple has to rip out part of their flower garden and plant a plant that makes them sick. It really does boggle my mind. It boggles my mind. Why fight it? Why fight it? Dynamics to it, but
what is turfgrass? What is turfgrass?
We're not sure. We're not sure. So there are certain types of grass that I think are classified as turfgrass. I think Kentucky bluegrass is one, but But yeah, it's not entirely clear what constitutes turfgrass.
What is turfgrass? The city of St. Peter's still to this day, I don't think know what turfgrass is. Because when we had to go through the appeals portion, the judge asked the attorney, what's turfgrass? And he said he did not know. But yet he's defending it.
We've been watching a documentary called Turf Wars by my guest, Dan Warner. I hope you enjoyed the film as much as I enjoyed it. Tens of thousands of dollars, public dollars, years in hearings and in court because Janice has too many flowers and not enough grass, which she's allergic to. How can they do this? This is not like a restrictive covenant in some suburb where I happen to live. I wouldn't be able to paint my house orange if I wanted or whatever. This is a city. How can they do this?
Right. So a covenant or a neighborhood association agreement is a private agreement that you enter into. This is a public entity, which it usually behaves differently than this. This is kind of a unique way to try and make your residents behave in a certain way.
Is it a zoning thing?
It is. It's an ordinance that would go along with. I think it's in the class of zoning ordinances.
Okay.
It goes along with the length of grass. What you can do with your property, and those are generally formulated to prevent you from doing some sort of public harm by mistake or on purpose.
Tell us about the other main character here, the attorney David Rowland of something called the Freedom Center of Missouri. Is that like a libertarian organization, or what do you know about it?
Yeah, what I know about Missouri Freedom Center is it basically Dave works for clients. He works for government transparency. He helps his clients fight for public records, fight injustice as he sees it. It is. I believe he has a more libertarian bent. But I mean, if you hear him talk about it, it's pretty hard to not be convinced by his arguments.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is he charging the Duffners for representing them, or is this some kind of pro bono thing?
No. Basically, Dave makes money in most cases off of attorneys' fees, so he doesn't actually charge his clients. This is from my understanding of his business model. He doesn't charge his clients. He only gets paid at the end if they win. A lot of times, you get a couple years in and you don't win. Or if you do win, a judge decides not to award attorney's fees. He works very hard on behalf of his clients, and he often doesn't get paid.
He seems like a man of principle. He seems like he thinks this is right.
Yeah.
And the fine community of St. Peter's, they refuse to talk to you. You approached the city of St. Peter's. I'm doing a documentary about this story, and I want to get the city's point of view, and I've got some questions for you. And they said no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's common for any governmental body involved in a lawsuit to not want to comment on an ongoing lawsuit. That's not surprising. What was surprising was the lengths that they went to avoid answering any questions about their ordinance. I'm trying to be diplomatic, but
don't be. That's all right.
Basically, withhold public records and prevent access to public records. It was fighting transparency. It was
they're spending public money on this case to prosecute this case. Shouldn't the public have a right to know, well, how much is this costing us in St. Peter's? This is our money, but they won't say anything.
Yeah, the public should. I think most people would agree that the public should know how much or how their government is spending taxpayer money. There are public records that should reveal that. I did not receive those public records.
Can't do a Freedom of Information?
Yeah, well, so locally it's public records request. So there's Missouri Sunshine Law is what it falls under. Yeah. According to Missouri Sunshine Law, the records that I requested should have revealed this information about how much they're paying. There are ways that it might be more complicated. It might be being paid through an insurance company or what have you. So there are ways around it, but it looks to me, and it's pretty hard to argue given that the city violated Sunshine Law multiple times during our interactions to try and hide these records. And I should say, I'm not positive that this is the way that the city is behaving, specifically in the Duffner's case. This is kind of an approach that a lot of governmental bodies end up having, trying to kind of keep the public from knowing exactly what they're doing and how they're spending money, because that's easier to do.
Arrogance. Arrogance is just amazing. You point out in the film that Janice is looking at potentially a fine of $318,000 and up to 23 years in jail if they were to go for the maximum of each day she's in violation and how much jail time. Mm-hmm. That's insane.
It is, and it's unlikely that any judge would actually sentence her to decades in jail for it, but the fact that they could is ridiculous. And even the minimum fine at this point, I actually don't remember what it is off the top of my head, but it's thousands of dollars, the minimum fine. So.
The last legal ruling so far, a federal court judge ruled against the Duffners and for the city of St. Peters. Is there going to be an appeal to that?
I believe Dave is working on an appeal. It's an issue where he needs some funding, so I think he's looking for funding to launch an appeal and to try and get that going. It was kind of a surprising ruling. I read the ruling. It's been a few months now, but it was an interesting ruling.
Any idea where this is heading? How it's going to end? State Supreme Court, and where would you go with this? Federal courts?
It is a federal lawsuit at this point. Okay. So, I mean, the ultimate would be the Supreme Court. Unlikely that it would ever reach there. But yeah, there's not really any telling where it's going. I can say for sure that Jan is not giving in, and I can say for sure that the city has shown no sign that it's interested in giving in. The city has actually. There's one thing that is finally mentioned in at the end of this film. The city actually did show that they were willing to amend the ordinance in question. They went in last year, in November 2017, and they amended the ordinance, but not to resolve this issue, to instead define what turf grass is. So they showed that basically it was, to me, a sign of digging in their heels and saying, we're going to force you to do this.
You have to have this much grass in your lawn. Mm-hmm. You have to. That's the law. Mm-hmm. Jeez. Dan, thanks for bringing your work to frames. It was a terrific story, and we'll be watching to see what happens with this sooner or later down the road.
Thanks, Jim.
Up next, a story of loss.
Dinner is served. Should I wake up Ducky?
No, let him sleep.
Okay, let's dig in then.
Up next on Frames, an unusual subject for a short film, death. My guest, Scott Michael Dunn, directed, wrote, and edited Slipping Away, the film that we're going to see in just a couple of minutes. Scott, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
An unusual subject for a short film, death. How did you come to it?
I was shooting a film at the time, and I wrote it in between takes. Most of it. It was about 8 pages, and it just came to me, the fear of loss, the fear of death, and how to come to handle that with family and where to take those emotions. And
was there any kind of a personal connection?
Not necessarily, no. It's just sort of, it dawns on you. You get inspired, and it's just, the relevance of inspiration isn't always identified. It's just an inspiration. So it's like, wow, this guy, he's slipping away. So he's losing the battle. And then how does he handle it?
And it's not just him.
No, the
it's
whole
his wife
family
and
is
his daughter.
Everyone's affected.
Yeah. Where did you find the actors?
I've worked with them before. Jackie Manker, she's a terrific talent. I've worked with her on other projects, shorts for collegiate projects. I work with Wesley on Dog Days in the Heartland. I just finished a project with him as a director with Dark Village Films called 1111. So
All right.
They're just good people. And I just reached out. I connected with them and I said, hey, you guys want to come play? And they said, sure.
All right. You want to set it up for us in any way?
Well, I mean, we've sort of identified the synopsis already, but it's a challenging feeling that I try to portray with the film, through the sound and through the characters, to identify with each one how it feels to watch a loved one slip away. Yeah.
Well, here's Scott Michael Dunn's film, Slipping Away.
Why don't you tell me what's going on, Stephen? I don't understand why you can't be here with your family. When's your next appointment? When's your next treatment? I feel like I'm totally in the dark. Why are you hiding all of this from me?
Rebecca, do you want me to just sit here and wait to die? I love you. And our babies. But I stay here, and all I can think about is the end. The end! Do you understand what I'm saying to you?
Amy, go back to your room. Just go get ready for school. Mommy and Daddy are just talking. Why would you say that? Why would you even say that?
I have to go. We'll talk about this later today.
Later, Stephen! I don't understand.
You're my angel. Okay? Ready for the big game this weekend?
Yeah, I have the super cool spin around move that I can show you. Hold on.
Hold on, Thunder. Let's get some silver on the table and have dinner first, okay? Smells great, babe.
I do what I can.
Okay. Never a dull moment around here.
Dinner is served. Should I wake up Ducky?
Nah, let him sleep.
Okay, let's dig in then. Hey babe, will you play with Declan for a minute? I got to finish this and I'm running out of time. Love you!
Hey, let's go play, Ducky. You have my heart, buddy. You know that, right? No one in this whole world could ever take that away from you. Hey. I can't wait to watch you grow up, buddy. Honey, I gotta make a call. Hey Jim, it's Steve. I need to get together with you next week and go over some important stuff. I've been doing some thinking and there's some things I need to get into order. You know, things you've been hassling me about anyway. Well, Anyway, give me a call when you get this and we'll set something up for next week. Thanks. Talk to you later, buddy.
Hey, babe.
Yeah. Hey, do you have the, oh, shoot. Do you have the
cones?
Yeah, the cones. Thanks, I'm losing it. Thanks, honey.
I don't know how you can manage without me.
Thanks, baby.
You're welcome.
Dad and I get the silverware. I'll get it. He'll be so mad that he wasn't here to help.
You sure will, dear.
Should I get Dad his silverware too, or is he working late?
Crickets on a night when there's diamonds in the sky. Mama's by fire and Daddy's close by. Brother's on a tractor, he's cleaning up the earth, making sure you're beautiful, just showing what you're worth.
That's fine.
Is Daddy dying?
Where did you hear that?
Hey.
Steve.
Yes.
Hello, ma'am. I'm sorry to bother you, but are you Rebecca Kane?
Yes. What's this about?
Ma'am, I am Officer Smith with the O'Fallon Police Department. Are you the wife of Stephen Kane? I'm sorry.
Mom!
You're my angel. Okay?
I moved into a city with buildings so cold, searching for humility in faces young and old. And right by all the roads in western Kentucky. I take them with me when I go, but I can't be that lucky. So I guess I'll stare at the snapshots created by my memory. Oh, Kentucky, thanks for having me.
We've been watching Slipping Away, a film by Scott Michael Dunn. Scott, it is very powerful stuff. Congratulations on
Thank
this.
you.
The film is very sad, but it is never for one moment maudlin. And that's such a fine line, you know, drama, melodrama. It's so easy to sort of go over the top and make it a three-hanky weeper. And it's not that, but it is still so sad.
Right, it carries a somber sound or feel to it throughout, but it's not, it doesn't inhabit that melodramatic feel where it's everyone's dwelling on the situation. Everyone's more so trying to identify with it. And I think that kind of eliminates that melodrama.
Well, I think the music helps a lot. The Chopin, and you contributed it too.
I wrote, some of the score. Most of it actually was Chopin, and Vicki Vaughn Band I did a video for her and her band, and she was nice enough to give me some of their music to utilize in the film.
It sets a really nice tone.
I have the Death March, if you knew that was
Chopin. Chopin's Funeral March. Finally, I have to ask you about your quote at the end. A single moment passed is equally a moment lost as it is a moment gained.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Everything that happens to us in life is one and the other.
A gain and a loss.
A gain and a loss. So you lose a moment, but gain education. You lose a moment, but gain love. You lose a moment, but gain romance. Now, the moment isn't a metaphorical moment. It could be a moment of time. It could be a moment of experience. But we do, every moment of our life is a loss and a gain equally, which is really kind of a unique look at life in general.
It's darn near profound, I gotta say. What's next for you? You got another film in the works?
Well,
what are you working on?
I'm excited about TPT Films Entertainment. Night's End is a new project. It's a national TV series that we're filming here locally in St. Louis, so that's exciting. We're getting prepped for that to do some wardrobe shoots, and I've got several movies that should be released this year. One's releasing next week called Abduction 207 by Viz Brown. 1111 I mentioned by Dark Village Films. That's later this year or next.
So you're acting and directing?
I directed Slipping Away. Really, ideally, the reason I did Slipping Away was to learn the other side of the camera. So I didn't want to play in it. I didn't want to be talent. I wanted to understand all that took place in the background. And it was a moving experience, educational and dynamically exhausting as well.
Well, congratulations.
Well, I
Continued
appreciate that.
success to you.
Oh, thank you.
Our final film tonight, an unusual love story.
You saved the uke and let me fall in?
These things aren't cheap, you know. Here.
I'm sorry you have to.
Finally tonight, a story of love. Does love conquer all? I don't know. Thea Schuessler of Bellevue co-wrote, co-directed, co-edited, and stars in The Wedding Song. Thea, welcome to Frames. Thank you for being here.
having me.
You and your partner, Rex New, shot in New Orleans. How did that come about?
We did. He is originally from Louisiana, and I think had always dreamt of shooting something there. And our DP, David Lee, was one of his high school buddies, and they both shot a couple of documentaries right out of college together and knew that they always eventually wanted to do a narrative. And Rex and I were in New Orleans for a wedding, a friend's wedding, and we met our actor, Will Dickerson, who actually was a pedicab driver who played the ukulele one-handed while pedicabbing, and he at the time lived with his parents in this beautiful uptown home, and we just thought he was such a character that we sort of based this whole thing around him.
Did you write this with you in mind?
Always. So
Okay.
I went to school for acting at USC in Los Angeles, and it's a very competitive world out there, and just sort of out of necessity, I realized a few years out of college that I just needed to start producing my own things. And Rex actually majored in screenwriting at USC also, so he already was doing a lot of that, and once I realized that I needed to start making my own work in order to act, then I started writing with him, always something that I could star in, so it was very selfish.
Anything autobiographical here?
Oh,
or is that a reach?
If you know me, I think maybe the people watching now might see a few personal things in there.
It's a very personal movie in many ways. I would say to our viewers, prepare for dramatic and romantic tension as we watch The Wedding Song.
What have we got lips for? What have we got arms for? Why do we have stars above? Oh, you know, I know everything's made for love. Why do we have preachers? Why do we have teachers? Why do we have weddings too? Oh, you know, I know everything's made for love.
No. I'm just gonna puke in the trash can.
Okay. Trash can's better than the sidewalk.
We all say I do. Oh, you know, I know everything's made
let's
for
get you
love.
home. I'll call an Uber.
Everything's made for love.
Johnny?
Hey?
Johnny?
May!
Johnny?
Who's Johnny?
Johnny went to Tulane with Brennan.
Hey, May. How's it going? Can't believe you guys are getting married.
I know.
Wow. Brennan must be doing pretty well. Y'all need a ride?
That would be great.
Johnny, are you single?
I am. Why? Having second thoughts? Just so you know, I still live with my parents.
You're really good.
Thanks. If you want to see me really play, you can come to Handsome Willie's on Thursday nights.
I'm there. Hey, do you ever teach lessons?
Yeah. Hey.
Hey.
See, you've recovered nicely from the other night.
Yeah. It definitely took me a couple of days. I'm sorry, I was so sloppy.
Oh, it's New Orleans. Believe me, I've dealt with sloppier. All right, let's go upstairs. So, why don't you play me what you wrote for Brennan?
Oh, so we're just gonna jump right in?
Well, how else do you want to do it?
I don't know, you're right. I'm new to this, so don't judge me. My past, my now, my fate. You are my perfect mate. I have, I will, I do love no one else but you. I'm sorry.
It's not bad.
It's bad.
It's bad. Let's just throw some stuff out there.
Okay.
Tell me what you love about Bran.
Oh, well, let me count the ways. Well, he's very smart and kind.
That's it?
What?
You're marrying this man in a month, and that's all you have to say about him.
I don't know. It's weird talking about your feelings.
But that's what a wedding's for, right?
Yeah.
Come on, what about the burning?
You might want to see a doctor about that, Johnny.
Are you incapable of being serious?
I don't know. I like how used to him I am.
Come on, where's the passion?
Have you ever been in a long-term relationship? I'm sorry. That was presumptuous. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I love him. I do. But do I burn for him? I don't know. I love him differently now. Like, it's steady, but not that hot. Like a slow cooker.
All right. I think we could do better than a crock pot.
I've never been this old before, and I'll never be this young again. Same with all my friends, but I don't mind. I'm all out of cash to give in life. Whoa, look, there goes all our precious time, and that's just fine. You and me, we just tiptoeing that line. That's just fine, fine, yeah. But I don't mind. I think I wanna have a little fun this time. Whoa, please don't waste all of our precious time. It's such a crime. You and me, we're just tiptoeing that line, and that's just fine, fine, yeah. Woo! And that's just fine, fine with me.
Why are you holding it like that?
I don't know. I think I might be more of a vertical player.
That's not a thing. Sorry.
All right, I got this. Oh, don't got this.
Let me see your fingers. All right, try it like this.
Oh, okay. So your one finger is holding down both strings.
Mm-hmm. And you put your thumb kind of pinched to get the extra leverage. Perfect.
Hey.
Nice. Now do it without looking at your fingers. All right, switch to D. Eyes up. Back to D flat.
Oh,
Here. Close your eyes. I'll do the strumming, I just want you to think about fingering. What are you, 5 years old?
Hey, I'll be 13 in December, thank you very much.
All right.
You saved the uke and let me fall in?
These things aren't cheap, you know? Here.
I'm sorry you have to. Hi.
There's the beautiful bride. Hey. Oh.
I'm so nervous. Can you feel my heart beating?
May. You and Brennan.
What? No, I was talking about the song.
Oh, all right. Of course.
Can we run through it real quick?
Yeah. One, two, three, four.
The moment that I first met you, it suddenly made sense. Why I'd plant my feet, but my heart would stray. How could I have known when I was searching for love that it would only be a streetcar away? Oh, I found you, and you found me, and you and me, we found our love in New Orleans.
May? Are you ready?
We've been watching The Wedding Song, co-written, co-directed, co-edited, and starring Thea Schussler. Thea, congratulations on a very romantic film. I mean, I'm as romantic as the next guy, and I was just, your character's getting married. She loves him. But there's no passion, there's no heat. That doesn't sound like much of a romance.
Right, the crock pot
It's
metaphor.
Sort of used to him. You know.
Yeah, when she describes him as smart and kind, like those are very lovely things to say, but yes, definitely not passionate.
But with Johnny, it's a different story. I mean, there are sparks flying all over the place. You meet this, who you knew before, and you run into him, and he's driving a pedicab. And things click. Music lessons, ukulele, singing, and more. Will they? Won't they? You build this tension as we're going through the movie, and we want to know what's going to happen. What's going to happen? And your ending, one of May's, your character's friends, hollers up, "May, are you ready?" Cut to black. And I'm left there with my chin hanging out. Come on. How did you decide to leave the ending up to us?
I think we liked the sort of choose your own adventure style ending. Mainly, for me, I felt we did write both endings, you know,
really?
just more as an experiment for ourselves.
Yeah.
We always knew we wanted to leave it up for interpretation. But we felt like if we went ahead and we saw her walk away and get married, then the audience would be disappointed that they didn't get to at least fantasize about her and Johnny. And if you did see them kiss and get together, then I don't know, there's a little judgment against May for not getting married and leaving her man at the altar. We just felt like either way there was going to be some sort of judgment. Whereas if you left it open, then the audience gets to imagine whatever they want. And
well, May is such a strong character in this. To me, this is not a woman who's going to be kind of bludgeoned into doing something because it's expected or it should be. I mean, she seems to me someone who is finding her feelings and understanding them, and she's going to do the right thing, isn't she? Maybe. We won't know. All right. What's ahead for you? You obviously have more movies coming. I mean, with the USC background and acting and the directing and the writing and all that. What are you working on?
I just released another that I shot in Paris, of all places.
Don't tell me a love story.
Well, it's actually about a breakup. It's sort of a tongue-in-cheek nod to the millennial sort of Pinterest generation. I don't know if you're familiar, but just the idea of the American moving to Paris after a breakup to solve all of her problems, and obviously it doesn't go that way. So.
No, but it's something people can relate to.
Absolutely.
I think. Well, continued success, and thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for watching. I'm Jim Eltoff. I'll see you next time on HEC TV.